For further input into the subject matter presented today, we assembled some of our community leaders to discuss this epidemic. Our stellar panel includes our district attorney, our solicitor general, our sheriff, a sergeant from the Clayton County Police Department, our superintendent, and one of our stellar teachers. Also here to facilitate the conversation is the host of the chat and lead counselor for the school district, Ms. Chateau Waters. Chateau?
Thank you, Dr. Hendrix. And today we have several guests from our community joining us to give feedback to our students. We have our very own superintendent.
Good morning, good afternoon, Ed Heatley.
Good evening. I'm Natasha Mosley, Solicitor General of Clayton County.
Good evening. My name's Tracy Lawson. I'm the district attorney.
Good evening. I'm Kim Kimbrough. I'm the sheriff of Clayton County.
Good evening. My name is Keith LaHare, and I teach middle school at Point South, Health and PE.
Good evening. My name is Sergeant Otis Willis III, Clayton County Police Department, Community Affairs.
Thank you for joining us. Dr. Heatley and Mr. Hare, as educators in Clayton County Public Schools, you work with our students every day. What are some of the warning signs or some of the things that you see in our young men that are signs that they're going down the wrong path?
I would say that the first warning sign that a person, not even just going down the wrong path, but has potential of going down the wrong path is the fact that they can actually walk, talk, and breathe. Because everybody has that potential, all right? But when you can actually detect that person going down that wrong path is when you say repetitive behaviors, such as getting in trouble a lot, just kind of drawing or withdrawing themselves from everyone else. You know, that's another sign. And then a lot of times you really can't tell. You just cannot tell. You can come from the best backgrounds, and then all of a sudden that one bad decision can lead you down that wrong path.
I'll elaborate on that a little bit because I think there's even more. I think the first sign should be the parents. They should know when your child is acting different. If your child has been very mannerable, then all of a sudden he's coming home or she's coming home, they're slamming doors, they keep the door closed, they're being disrespectful, they're not doing their chores, they're not doing their homework. Those are signs. When they're in school, students who are acting out, why are they acting out? If you ask a student to read aloud and instead they start acting out, maybe they can't read or maybe there's something else. The people they hang around with. Now, I don't probably know every person my children hang out with, but I make it a point to meet them all, them and their parents, because that tells me a lot as well. And then who they hang out with and when they hang out with them. It's different when they're in school than when they're out of school. So when I travel around Clayton County, I like to go around the schools early in the morning before school starts, just so I can see the pockets of people, what they're doing, what they're not doing, how they dress, how they speak to one another, how they speak to adults, how they listen to and respond to authority. I think, just like Mr. Harris said, it's hard to tell, but at the same time, I think it's very easy to tell when you have a relationship with the students. So from a school standpoint, I think that every educator should make sure that they meet and greet and talk to every student.
And as educators, you all have been educators for years, some for decades. What are some of the support system deficits with these young men who are going down the wrong path that you've identified?
I know that as an educator, you have a lot of educators, they want to just keep the job, and that's it. You know, I have children of my own to raise, or, you know, you don't pay me enough to do that. But when you take on the job of being an educator, you take on the job of being a father, a mother, a counselor, a consoler, a pastor, or whatever. You know, you take on that responsibility. And I know it's a lot to take on, and sometimes it can be stressful, you know, because I have twin boys, 7 years old, and when I take on all the personalities that I get daily, it's a lot to withdraw from. But you have to engulf yourself into what you're doing at your work. And you have to say, okay, I'm here for a bigger purpose, and what is that purpose? I know for a fact that when I'm teaching health education, sometimes there are days when I can't crack open that book because there is something that needs to be handled. We may be on nutrition, but the school may have had issues with bullying. I have to drop that and go straight to what's going on. So I have to step out of my role as an educator and say, okay, now this is what I would do if this was my child. Because sometimes, like you said, parents, they're not involved. And we are the closest thing to being a parent for a lot of kids. And if we don't take that effort, then where else are they going to get it? They tried it at home, they tried it at school, what's left? The streets. And we can't, let that happen if we have the opportunity to stop it.
I would also add to that the community itself, the lack of communication and partnerships. So Mr. Hare talked about parents being involved. I think there has to be a connection between the school system and the community and the parents, because what happens a lot of times, the issues that are going on in the community find their way into the school site. And then how do you mitigate a community issue? Well, you come to school and it's about math, English, science, social science, and others. It's not about, in theory, socialization skills. So that's a big problem. I would also add the counseling aspect. If I take this young person out of class to provide some counseling and they fall back, is there another form of counseling that's available? I think the art of parenting is another part of the system, and the art of being an educator. Like Mr. Harris said, education is bigger than I'm a teacher. 51,209 students in Clayton County, and I treat them all as my own children. So if everybody took that attitude, in my opinion, then we're fixing the system. Communication, denial. I remember as being a child, if my parents did get called, because of the fear, I probably wouldn't go home. No. But my mother and father didn't say, my child didn't do that. They listened because they knew me very well, and then they would say, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but they heard both sides. What I hear a lot from parents now is the teacher's out to get my child, and the child never does anything wrong. Well, the child is sometimes wrong, and the adult is sometimes wrong. So if we come to the table understanding nothing's perfect, that's going to help the system. Our community, our faith-based, our business community, our mentorships, they're almost non-existent right now. Who's going to go back into Clayton County and say, we're going to make an investment into Clayton County, no matter what the cost? And it's really not dollars and cents. Most of the time, it's positive role models.
So Sheriff Kimbrough and Sergeant Willis, what is a common progression for these students? If we don't grab them when we notice that they're going in the wrong direction, what do you see on your end?
Well, certainly, once a student has lost his or her interest for school and has become such a problem in the school that the school environment is no longer a safe and positive learning environment for other students, first we have to recognize that there's been a great loss there in opportunity, because education equals opportunity. If you lose out on your education, you lose out on your future opportunities. And when that happens, you lose your hope. You lose your ability to sustain yourself as a model citizen. If you're unable to get a job, then you're unable to support yourself or any other people in your family. And that sense of hopelessness and that lack of opportunity, that lack of ability to maintain oneself, it only leads one to a criminal path. And there are a lot of things out there that seem to be innocent acts, but when we break rules in the adult world, that's what a crime is. It's breaking the rules. Just like when you talk in class, that's a violation of a school rule. When you drive the wrong way down the street in the real world, that's a crime. When you take things that don't belong to you, that's a crime. When you are able to trick someone into giving you more money than you deserve, or give you services that you don't deserve, those things are criminal acts. And once those things occur and you are caught, and inevitably you will be caught, then you're going to enter into the criminal justice system. And regardless of the outcome of that case, once you're in that system, there are secondary effects. If you have to get a background check for a job, which almost all employers now require some sort of background check, any history that comes up on that background check is an excuse for them not to hire you. And certainly everyone dwells so much on felony convictions, but that's not where the case ends. In this economic environment where jobs are scarce in the first place and employers need a reason to weed someone out, any criminal history we are finding is an excuse for them to not offer employment to someone. So if you've embarked on that path and lost that opportunity from the school environment, and then engaged in criminal activity, then it starts a vicious cycle. You don't have any opportunity, you're in jail. With jail comes fees and fines and probation. Every time they get out, they violate something else and they're right back in. And once that progression starts, it's pretty difficult to break. And so we wind up having a hardcore career recidivist criminal. And unfortunately, there's always going to be a place for people like that. I've told many young men and women that, it's a struggle for us to get a tax increase for education or a tax increase for transportation. But there will never be any challenge finding funds for detention facilities. We will always have a Clayton County jail. We will always have a state prison system. It's unfortunate, but there will always be funds for those things because the rest of us, quote unquote, the rest of us in society, we don't want to deal with people who refuse to follow the rules and place all the rest of us in jeopardy. So people will always find an ability to support that. The key thing is to just never get started on that cycle. Recognize that education equals opportunity and focus your efforts and energies towards that.
I totally agree with the sheriff. Hopelessness. That's what often we see out there. Young people who do not take an interest in education. And if you can't read, if you're a grown man, read on a third grade level, your problem solving is going to be on a third grade level. That's why we see some of the crimes that we see that just don't make sense to the average citizen. They start with misdemeanors, then they build up until it's an unfortunate situation where someone truly get hurt, and then society put them away many times. But it's hopelessness. Education is so important because the more you become educated, the more you be able to see that there's so many opportunities, especially here in the United States. But you need the education to grow your mind to be able to think on that level. And unfortunately, TV, music, which a lot of our teenagers live their whole life around, is destroying them. It's programming them to be failures. And unfortunately, we're seeing that a lot. So just like everyone is saying, truly, truly, education is the key to freedom.
Thank you. Most of the young men that Dr. Hendrix and Dr. Heatley interviewed yesterday mentioned that they got involved with gangs and bad behaviors by following other students and other people in their community. If I'm a single parent and I'm working constantly, are there self-destructive behaviors that I should keep an eye out for?
Yes, hanging with the wrong crowd. It's an old saying, birds of a feather flock together. It's true. Most of the time, athletes going to hang with athletes. Doctors will hang with doctors, so on and so forth. And unfortunately, criminals or people with criminal minds, they're going to have their own social club. And that social club usually end up in prison, where they all socialize, I guess you can say. And I know the sheriff would probably agree with me. You hate seeing young people throw their life away. It's truly sad because, like I said, the opportunities here in the United States, not many places in the world you can beat it. But the education is free. Open up the book and travel within the book, and it'll bring you to freedom.
I would add to that, echoing something that Dr. Heatley said, it's the parent's responsibility to police your child. You should know where your child is. You should set parameters for your child. And you should know with whom your child associates. As Sergeant Willis said, birds of a feather flock together. If you don't know who your child associates with, and you don't know that child's background, you don't know the child's parents, you don't know anything about that child's academic achievement or academic attainment, what they're about in school, then you've basically given your child to the streets. And if you give your child to the streets, then that's the outcome we can expect. You will reap what you have sown. So we encourage parents, and we encourage anyone who cares about a child, because we recognize it may be deeper than the parents. But anyone who cares about a child, if you want to see that child stay on the right path, then involve yourself with the child. Concern yourself with the child. Find out what the child is doing, how the child is doing, and make sure that you steer them in the right direction so that they develop the habit of looking for these sorts of people to associate with. I would like for my children, I'm a parent of 2 boys, and I want to see my children, they need to hang with little boys and little girls who do their homework. They need to hang with little boys and little girls who do chores around the house. They need to hang with little boys and little girls that say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. Those are the sorts of things that I'm looking for from my children's associates, and I'm starting that at an early age, and I'm going to maintain it throughout their lives, because the moment I stop demanding that and the moment that I stop inquiring as to who they're with, then I have basically given my children up. And once you do that, then you give them up to the rest of the world. And as I've said, we have mechanisms to deal with people who have given up on a productive life.
As the Solicitor General and the District Attorney, what are some of the crimes with mandatory sentences that you can share with us?
On the misdemeanor side, there are not many. They all deal with driving. Fleeing and eluding, that's when somebody's trying to run away from the police officers or the sheriff's deputies. That's a mandatory minimum, 10 days in jail. No ifs, ands, buts about it. Suspended license, your first suspended license, mandatory 2 days in jail, and then it graduates up from there to the point in time it becomes a felony, and then she gets to put you in jail. Your DUI, your first DUI says a minimum of 24 hours, but really could be up to 3 days, and it's just a graduated scale. So those are some of the misdemeanor crimes that there are mandatory sentences on.
In felony arena, the most serious one, of course, would be murder. The mandatory sentence is life, although you can get the death penalty and you can get life without parole, but you have to get at least life. And we commonly see the younger people committing that in conjunction with drug transactions and occasionally with an armed robbery. And the minimum they'll spend in jail on a life sentence is 30 years before they're even eligible for parole. Doesn't mean they're going to get out after 30 years. It means that they can at least apply for parole. So if they're 17, they don't get out till they're 47 at the earliest. Another one with a mandatory minimum is rape or aggravated child molestation. Those are sex offenses with a mandatory minimum of 25 years, again, with no parole until you've served all those 25 years. The most common one we see with the young people is armed robbery, where the mandatory minimum is 10 years. Doesn't matter if it's a pellet gun, a BB gun, an empty gun, a broken gun. Doesn't matter if you're the party to the crime and you drive the getaway vehicle. Doesn't matter if you're the guy that just orders the pizza to the house that's vacant and then your buddies go and rob them. They get 10 years in prison. And that one harms our young people probably the most because it's the most common.
Because the two of you are very familiar with the consequences for committing a crime, if you were witnessing a young man about to commit a crime, what advice would you give him?
Stop and think, first and foremost. Stop. Stop, breathe, and think. I think nowadays the young people are reactionary. They don't know how to control their emotions or their tempers. So if someone angers them, the first thing that, or disrespect them, the first thing that they think they have to do is get revenge. I must get my street cred back. So that might precipitate him pulling out a gun and pointing it or shooting at the person, setting up a drive-by shooting. That's what our kids don't do. They don't stop and think. They're impulsive. So that's what I would tell them. That is the main thing. Stop, breathe, and think. Think about what are the potential consequences of your actions, because there are. Hollywood might not show the consequences. You might be able to ride around, smoke a little weed or something like that, and in Hollywood you don't get any trouble. You might get a little ticket and they let you off with a little community service, but the real world, there are some significant consequences. So I would say stop and think.
I'd probably ask them two different things. I'd ask them if your mom or dad or little brother or grandma or grandpa were standing right here, would you still do this? And if you wouldn't do it in front of them, you don't need to do it at all. And then the second thing I'd ask them, if you knew the police were going to catch you, I was going to prosecute you, and you were going to do 10 years in prison, would you still do that? Because that's what's going to happen.
By all accounts and societal norms, you're considered successful. What would you contribute to your success?
I guess I'll start. I'll say my faith and my family. My parents specifically, because they raised us right. They raised us to be God-fearing and to be mom and dad-fearing. And so it wasn't so far as breaking the law or the rules that I worried about. It was what was going to happen to me when I got home if I broke those laws and rules. And then they also taught me about teamwork. So I'm a God-fearing man. I believe in the power of mom and dad, and I believe in the power of teamwork.